Is YouTube taking over television? That seems to be the question on a lot of people's mind right now, and the answer might actually surprise you. Hi, I'm Robert Hollywood Goblet. I'm a professional independent filmmaker, and I've been in the filmmaking industry professionally since about 2014. And today, I want to show you how we are seeing the biggest shift in entertainment history since the rise of cable television. And it's happening right now before our eyes. And why content creators are at the very center of all this drama. Why we're seeing so much information about it, and why this is happening. But this isn't really a story about YouTube itself. It's a story about television, how it's being redefined right now. But it's not new. History is repeating itself in ways that Hollywood doesn't really want you to notice. So we're going to talk about that for just a few minutes to look at the history of what's happened and why we're seeing the change that we are. But let's pivot to YouTube real quick. When you sit down after work and you prop your feet up and you start flipping through the channels on television, you might think of Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or ABC, Fox. But here's the pivot. According to YouTube CEO Neil Mohan, television really is YouTube. And honestly, he's not wrong, and the numbers are proving it. People are streaming over 1 billion hours of YouTube on their TVs every single day. For the first time ever, those numbers have actually surpassed phone viewing apps or computers or tablets. That means that YouTube is no longer that thing that you sit there and scroll through on your phone while sitting on the toilet. That's what TikTok's for. But YouTube is the new TV remote. It's the new cable box. It's the new living room hub, and people are surrounding it. More people watch YouTube than any other streaming platform there is. And the numbers back it up. Wall Street Journal just named YouTube the new king of all media in 2025. YouTube is projected to pass Disney as the single biggest media company in the world, generating over $55 billion, that's billion with a B, $55 billion annually. So let that sink in for just a second. YouTube, which once was a place for cat videos and pranks or parody songs or podcasts, it's now worth an estimated $550 billion because of their platform. And here's the kicker. Engagement on YouTube versus television is still extremely under-monetized, which means that creators are about to get even more opportunities than ever before. Because YouTube knows this, they know the algorithm, and they're seeing the numbers. So YouTube is rolling out new tools for content creators to make their channels feel more like television and networks. Content creators can now package their content into seasons or into specific shows and episodes to make them feel like real channels. And they can also add QR codes to their videos so that viewers can scan the TV screens with their phones and get instant engagement automatically with the content creators and with the channel. And YouTube is also launching this AI dubbing program, which will automatically translate the videos into multiple languages and sending it globally around the world. And content creators, they're responding. 40% of YouTube's top 100 channels are primarily watched on television screens. Uploads of 4K videos are up 35% this year, and the number of content creators making the majority of their revenue actually comes from television screens, which is up 30% from what it was the year before. And as Neil Mohan summed it all up perfectly in just these few little words, he said, creators are the new Hollywood. And we're seeing it right before your eyes. So let's get in our DeLorean. Let's go up to 88 miles an hour with our 1.21 gigawatts of electricity. And let's go back in time because we're going to see that this isn't actually new. We're going to see that this has actually happened before. Every 10 years, we see a shift in the industry. And that's all we are doing now. So there's no need to fear. Underdog is here. So let's travel back to the 1960s. Hollywood was in crisis. Sound familiar? The big studio systems of its day that had dominated for decades were crumbling. Movie theaters were losing money. Sound familiar? Audiences weren't connecting to these glossy, formulaic movies that the studios kept pumping out. Young audience, the new baby boomer generation, they wanted films that felt real, rebellious, authentic. You know, all this sound familiar? Because it's happened before and it was happening then. And Roger Corman and Dennis Hopper and Jack Nicholson stepped on the scene and they changed everything. Roger Corman is actually referred to and called the godfather of independent films. We're not talking about Ed Wood style films. This was Roger Corman. He made these movies with these shoestring budgets, and sometimes he could pump out a movie every 2 weeks. And here's the thing, they actually made money. Corman proved that you didn't need these $1 million from the studios. You didn't have to have a big studio machine to tell your story to the audience. The audience were starving for it, and they were coming at it, and they wanted to see it. And so he cranked out dozens of these horror movies and sci-fi thrillers and biker movies and exploitation flicks, and people actually showed up. But his biggest impact into the filmmaking industry wasn't necessarily his films, it was the talent that he nurtured. Roger Corman gave breaks to filmmakers like Francis Ford Coppola, Martin Scorsese, James Cameron, Ron Howard, Jonathan Demme. All these great directors of today and of all time that we see actually all came from Roger Corman. He created a pipeline where independent voices could be heard all around the world. They could thrive because of this pipeline that Corman had set up long before Hollywood was ready to accept them. Then came Dennis Hopper. He was the rebel who shook Hollywood because in 1969, Dennis Hopper directed and starred in his own movie called Easy Rider. It was a countercultural road trip movie about freedom, about drugs, and the American dream. It was raw, it was unpolished, and had almost absolutely nothing in common with the polished studio movies of the day, especially back there in the time. And it changed the way people listen to soundtracks and music with movies. The budget was less than $400,000, but the box office that came through because of Easy Rider was over $60 million worldwide. The film hit Hollywood like an earthquake. Easy Rider showed that audiences were hungry for something new, something real, and marked the beginning of what many people call the new Hollywood era, which is funny. This is the 1960s. So it's literally been over 70 years ago. But suddenly studios started realizing that their survival depended on listening to young filmmakers. So the floodgates opened up and we had movies like The Godfather, Taxi Driver, and yes, even Star Wars. Hopper proved that rebellion could outperform the establishment. And then we had Jack Nicholson, the man who became the face of New Hollywood. He got his start by working in Roger Corman's low-budget films. And his big breakout role came in Easy Rider when he played this alcoholic lawyer named George Hansen. He was rough, he was tough, he was unforgettable. The performance was amazing. He was funny, he was tragic, and he was totally different from the movie stars of old Hollywood system. He wasn't John Wayne. This was the new face. So Jack Nicholson became the new face of Hollywood, and they started pumping him out in all sorts of different movies, like Five Easy Pieces, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, Chinatown, The Shining. Nicholson was everywhere, playing these complex, edgy characters that people hadn't seen before, and he didn't look anything like the Hollywood heroes of the past. He showed that actors could be cultural icons, but they could be real. They could be raw. They could be messy. They could be human. And he bridged the gap between the counterculture and the mainstream. And then, of course, we have George Lucas. George Lucas, whose independence is on a galactic scale. Like, this guy is independent all the way. Lucas started with a small independent film it was a sci-fi film called THX 1138. That got him some success as he moved forward and did American Graffiti. But it was Star Wars that changed everything in 1977. And here's what people forget about that movie because, we see it all the time. But Lucas didn't just create Star Wars. He reinvented the way movies were made and distributed, and he fought tooth and nail for creative control against the studios. And when he put his credit at the end of Empire Strikes Back, the Directors Guild, the Writers Guild, and I believe it was the SAG Actors Guild, they all sued him. They sued him, and Lucas refused to back down, and so he quit all the gigs. He quit all the unions. He quit all that stuff entirely, decided to go completely independent and do his own thing. And because of that, he ended up with complete creative control over Star Wars, the rights, the merchandises, the sequels, the t-shirts, the lunchboxes, and he created his own empire literally outside the Hollywood system. Lucas showed that you didn't have to play by the studio rules anymore. You could build your own systems. You could build your own studios. You could make your own movies. However, while this rebellion against the studios kind of began in the 60s and 70s, and like I said, by 1977, we saw a true infrastructure change. We started seeing a more sustainable independent movement that actually began in the 1980s. See, every 10 years, something's happened. And thanks to newer technologies and distribution platforms and audience behavior and the rise of home video and the direct-to-VHS era, one of the most transmorphing changes that happened in the industry was the explosion of the home video market. And we've talked about that before, but this widespread availability of VHS tapes gave a rise for these video rental stores like Blockbuster or Hollywood Videos that allowed independent filmmakers to bypass theatrical releases and go straight to their audience, right to their homes. This opened up the door. This opened up the floodgates for more low-budget independent film companies like Wes Craven, Sean Cunningham, several of them, because they started being able to make horror films and these exploitation films, this direct-to-home video market, which began to have a booming niche. We saw things like Trauma Video or Full Moon Entertainment with movies like Toxic Avenger or Doll Man or the Subspecies movies, and they didn't have a lot of claimed box office success, but they generated huge revenues and had a major cult following. And these films weren't contained by rating systems or mainstream audience expectations. These filmmakers had more freedom to kind of explore and experiment with gore and comedy and taboo subjects and different unique storytelling. These films proved that they were viable in this economic model outside of traditional Hollywood support. And that niche audiences out there was incredibly loyal that would come back again and again and again. And the independent cinema exploded. And so by the 1990s, even though the seed had been planted by this movie market of the 80s and the 70s and the 60s, it boomed and blossomed into a full revolution in American cinema. So we have storytellers and filmmakers like Steven Soderbergh, Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater, Quentin Tarantino, all these people, Robert Rodriguez, that started making their own stuff largely outside the traditional Hollywood framework. Look at Steven Soderbergh's Sex, Lies, and Videotapes, 1989. It was a major turning point because it was shot on an extremely low budget, and the film premiered at Sundance, which at the time, that was it's still a big thing. But anyway, it won awards at Cannes, proving that indie films could be taken completely serious on an international stage and found real commercial success. Kevin Smith's Clerks, 1994, shot around $27,000, all with credit card debt, found a national audience thanks to its raw honesty and humor and strong characters. People love that things, and the success showed aspiring filmmakers that even though you have modest means, you could yield real results in the writing and the voice, and it made things more authentic. People like Quentin Tarantino, perhaps one of the most iconic figures of this new wave, broke through with Reservoir Dogs, 1992, Pulp Fiction, 1994. I mean, his stuff was great. His style, his nonlinear storytelling, his dialogue, his pop cultural references was deeply influenced by the 1970s Groundhouse and this VHS era films that had come out. And his sharp wit created this new cinematic literacy. And he blended kind of lowbrow and highbrow, rich and poor, mixed it together and redefined indie films as they're known. And at the time, at this exact same time, you had distributors like Miramax, New Line Cinema, IFC. They began capitalizing on this movement, acting as a middleman between indie filmmakers and mainstream media, essentially forming a new studio system for independent films. So this legacy and impact of the 1990s represented the movement when these kind of a forced conversion. The home video market revolution created a valuable market for low-budget, offbeat films, and the Sundance Film Festival and these other festivals started happening, creating platforms for independent voices, and we started seeing huge success. And this direct-to-video market of the horror genre specifically started making audiences come to the system in droves, looking for unique characters, unique stories driven outside the studio systems, and it reshaped Hollywood pretty much from the inside out. Now, we all know that. So even these big major studios started mimicking the indie movement and started creating different divisions, like Fox Searchlight was trying to capture on all that and trying to create more independent films. So the 1990s saw this revolution in Hollywood cinema by releasing a bunch of things that we've already seen before. It was a shift in how films got distributed or was made or consumed by the audiences. You had movies like, what was that? The llama and Tina, God, man, what was that? Napoleon Dynamite. Movies like that, we just started this huge wave and movement, and we saw these things coming out, and it was all because of this new wave entertainment that was trying to look at. We can't bring up the change in Hollywood cinema without bringing up Scream. Scream changed the pop culture phenomenon in movies forever because in 1996, before then, movies and TV shows had to be really careful about referencing copywritten material or characters or even franchises. You couldn't have a character be sitting around talking about Batman or Freddy Krueger. They had to have permission from the studios before they could even write that in the script to say, hey, we're sitting around talking about Batman. It had to be granted. And oftentimes they weren't granted because these characters were licensed, they were trademarked, and they were protected very carefully. So a writer had to work around that. They couldn't say Batman, but they could say a guy dressed up like a bat. We watched that superhero movie, and he let the audience kind of fill in the blanks. But Scream changed all that because directed by Wes Craven and written by, Kevin Williamson, Scream wasn't just a slasher film. It was a meta horror movie that kind of made a commentary in today's society. The characters in Scream actually talked about other horror movies. They referenced Halloween, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, and dozens more by name specifically. They even joked about the rules of surviving horror movies that made pop culture a part of the actual plot and storyline. This wasn't just funny or self-aware. It was groundbreaking, especially at the time. It was just like something new that people hadn't seen before. And Scream showed that you could weave pop culture directly into the story and make it part of your character's world. Just like in real life, because these are just kind of conversations that people were having at home. And because this reference were used in commentary or parody or criticism, it fell under fair use, which opened up the floodgates legally and creatively. And it caused a huge shift directly in television and how generation perceive things. Many of the YouTube channels that talk about other movies right now or review movies couldn't be made without that leap and change by 1996. Big Bang Theory itself, one of my favorite TV shows, just like Friends, but Big Bang Theory wouldn't exist without Scream, without it breaking the wall first, because the entire premise behind Big Bang Theory is built around characters, these nerds that discuss pop culture, like Star Wars or Marvel or Lord of the Rings, Batman, Aquaman, Wonder Woman, Thor. They all say these characters by names and live the dialogue that made it seem more real and connected audiences to these characters because they talked the way real people talked about things that real people talk about. And today, that same shift is part of what allows creators on YouTube or TikTok or other platforms to really engage in pop culture so freely because they weren't able to before. Commentary, analysis, parody, fan edits, all these things thrive on this same fair use rules that Scream helped push into mainstream storytelling. And so that was a new thing. Laws began to change. Things began to open up. So yeah, Scream didn't just revive the horror movie genre, it rewired how movies and shows could reflect the real world and fandom and media, and set the stage of how we interact with pop culture of today, and what opened up the floodgates for YouTube to come around in 2005 to 2007. That's when it found its big mark. But you're seeing a pattern that's repeating itself over and over, because now it seems like the independent creators of then are now being replaced by the independent creators of today. Creators who once uploaded funny skits and daily vlogs on YouTube are now landing agents, movie deals, production budgets. Take the Canadian TikToker Chris Collins. She's hot, she's funny, she's great. She just produced a micro-budget horror film, House of Eden, alongside with some other influencers. And what started out as short-form comedy skits turned into full-length feature films. And this is happening we see it all the time. Movies and TV shows that are inspired by YouTube thing. Take Cobra Kai. People, when they think of Cobra Kai, they think of the Netflix powerhouse show that's been running for 6 seasons strong. I mean, they love it. You know, Cobra Kai never dies. We love Cobra Kai. But most people forget that that's actually a YouTube original. For the first 2 seasons, Cobra Kai actually lived on YouTube before Netflix ever picked it up and turned it into kind of the cultural pop phenomenon it is today. It started on YouTube. And it makes sense now with streaming services that are booming and becoming more and more expensive. More people are returning back to the free platforms like YouTube and Tubi and Freevee, and there's one called F Awesome. And officially they're starting to see that this new support for the television viewing is actually switching to YouTube on their television than any other service out there. And so we're seeing this shift that's being made, that these independent films are coming up and becoming. So what does this all mean for content creators? It means that the game has changed, but the opportunity is bigger than ever before. So just like George Lucas or Roger Corman or Dennis Hopper, even Christopher Nolan made his first movie an independent film that he could only afford to film 1 weekend a month for an entire year before he finished it. So don't wait for Hollywood to come knocking. Your camera is in your pocket. Your distribution channel on YouTube is 100% free, and your audience is already there begging for your content. They want to see stuff. They scroll every single day, and they're wanting to see these things. But here's the thing. This also means that you have to start thinking like a TV producer, like a film producer, not just a hobbyist. You got to package your content like shows. Think about seasons, think about episodes, think about consistency, and then shoot for higher quality, because people aren't just watching YouTube on their phones anymore. They're sitting there watching all this content on these 70-inch plasma screen TVs in their house. So most importantly, you got to tell stories that only you can tell, because right now, creators are Hollywood. So is YouTube taking over television? The numbers say yes. Absolutely. More people watch YouTube than any other streaming platform. But the bigger truth is, this isn't new. It's nothing to be afraid of. History is repeating itself. From Roger Corman's scrappy B movies to Dennis Hopper's Rebellion, you got all these things. Just like George Lucas, you can build your own empire. Every generation has seen the outsiders take control of the older systems that stopped working. And now it's our turn. So the question isn't really whether YouTube is the new television. The real question is, are you ready to be part of the new Hollywood system? We have never had these opportunities than we do right now. And I know what you're thinking, because YouTube came out in 2005. It didn't really see a lot of traction and become super popular until 2007. And here it is, 2025. So you might be thinking, oh my gosh, it's too late. I should have rode the YouTube wave. I haven't been creating consistently and stuff like that. That's okay, because now, more than ever, we're seeing the change. We're seeing the influence. It took all these years since 2005 to become what it is. 20 years later since the beginning of YouTube, but now YouTube is now caught up and has gone beyond regular network television. More people will watch YouTube than they will ABC, NBC, CBS. So if you want to be in the system, if you want to make movies, if you want to be a content creator and you want to finally get your break, then just start making content. Start getting out there, because the doors are open. All you got to do is be willing to pass through it. Anyway, guys, it's hot in here. I need to turn on my air conditioner. The dogs are scratching at the door, and I have a pot of coffee waiting for me. But guys, I love you all. God bless you. Live with passion. Keep filming.